Hi everyone, welcome to this Farm of the Future, Making Money from Sheep Using Data, Genetics and Wool webinar, which is part of the Royal Agricultural Society of England Farm of the Future programme of webinars and events. To find out what else we've got going on, do head to our website to find out more and how you sign up to become a member if you'd like to see everything else that's going on. So this evening we have 4 speakers to talk to you all around making money from wool. I'm Holly and I head up the livestock and Farm of the Future programs within RASE and IFA. I'm also a sheep farmer from West Sussex myself, so I'm very keen to hear what our expert speakers have to say this evening. So first up we have Frank Langrish, who is partner in Langrish Farmers, which is based in East Sussex. He's a past chairman of British Wool and has a wide knowledge of wool and uses across the world. He's also going to tell us about his large Romney flock that he is breeding to make the most of wool, and a very exciting project that he's involved with the Agritech Centres, which I believe is called Fabulous Fibre Project. So we look forward to hearing from him shortly. Then secondly, we have Tim White, who is the director of Exlana and is a first-generation farmer. He'll be telling us about the importance of genetics and breeding sheep and performance recording around wool. Then we have Andy Weir and Jen Hunter from Fernhill Farms, who will be telling us how they are adding value to their sheep flock through the use of genetics and fleece selection to add value to their flock through that way. So next, I will hand over to Frank. Are you all right to share your slides, Frank?
Hope so. Are we there?
Yes, we are. And so everyone, sorry, I should have said, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box, which should be on the bottom of your screens, I believe, and do add them as we go along. We will answer all the questions at the end, unless there's any really very relevant ones, which we will answer as we go along. But take it away, Frank. Thank you.
Okay, well, having been involved with Romney sheep all my life, and I am just old enough to remember when half of our income came from wool. When the wool price completely crashed, and we received a cheque for £6,000, and it cost us £15,000 to shear them, I realised that something had to be done. So I spent a lot of time researching ways of adding value to wool, and one of the ways is actually to try and make it finer. Many people don't realize that there's a magic number with wool, which is 30 micron. Once you fall below 30 micron, the fibre is no longer scratchy against the skin. And so it immediately opens up far more uses of high value for clothing and apparel, undergarments, you name it, it can be done. Whereas before, pretty well all of our wool ended up in carpets or interior textiles. So just before COVID, we happened to have had a New Zealand girl shearing for us, Megan Whitehead, and she went back home to New Zealand and set the world record for the most lambs shorn by a woman. And she did 667. And I was happened to be watching this on Facebook, and she was shearing these beautiful, fine white wool lambs. And I asked what they were, and I was told they were called snow lines. And so I emailed the company, which is the McDonald family, and actually didn't get a reply. And I did it again in Christmas. I had 2-line reply back. It said, not interested in selling genetics, but come and have a look. So then COVID struck and I couldn't go anywhere. So it wasn't until February last year that I managed to get to New Zealand and have a look. So I actually looked at 2 other, well, there was one other breeder that has actually looked at you breeding finer wool on maternal meat sheep, and that was the Kelso. And they had a breed called the Oland, but that had an element of merino in it, whereas the Snowline has no merino. So that's where we started from. So I've imported 14 rams from Snowlines from New Zealand, and they average 26 micron. And so that's been the base point. So we we've managed to get some funding to help to do some of the research work and a lot of testing of wool. Very, very few farmers actually know what micron that their wool is. And even I was surprised when we started to test some of our sheep. We found that we did have some that were already below 30 micron. So as part of that, we actually selected the finer sheep to cross with. Now, how do I get to the next slide, everybody?
You just hit your space bar or click your mouse.
Say that again.
Click your mouse once.
Oh, yeah. Right. Okay. Now, the important thing, as far as I was concerned, was that we still needed to have a meat sheep. And the carcass on the right, hopefully you can see it if it's not hidden behind everybody that's sitting there. Oh, hang on a minute. How do I go back now? Oh, yeah. That is actually one of the lambs that I rejected when this was this year's lamb crop, and so we kept back all of the lambs for testing, and that's a Snowline Cross Romney lamb, a 21.5 kilo carcass, but its wool was over 30 micron. So I've only kept any of the lambs from this year's crop that are 28 or below, and as a starting point. Originally, I was going to go for 30, but when we found out that 90% of the lambs were under 28, so it's been a great starting point. So this was how we did it. We actually selected the finer ewes in different groups. The finest group of all were the orange ones, and we used a ram that was also a finer ram. It was only 25 micron, and you can see that the overall average micron carried through from the ram to 25.2, which is quite extraordinary, really. We were expecting to see about a 25-30% genetic gain. We ended up with an over 60% genetic gain, which means that you can actually breed finer wool remarkably quickly, providing that you select for it. And in value terms, as soon as you drop below 30 micron, the value increase is almost exponential. And so this was a figure that we used back in the summer. In fact, the good news is that the price of all wool has now risen, and the last two British wool sales, including one today, have averaged over £1 a kilo, and that includes all wools, whether it be the Romneys, Cheviots, or whether it be Swaledales or Welsh. The Swaledales and the Welsh today saw the biggest increase in value. So there is some good news or better news on wool. It's still got a long way to go. But if we can get down to 25 micron, potentially we could get a price around about £7 or £8 a kilo. And off a Romney, if you're shearing 3 or 4 kilos of wool, that's 30 odd pounds potentially from a sheep. So a lot of people have almost dismissed wool altogether. So it should be white wool. Do you have white wool sheep, and are you happy with the low price you receive? Have you given up on wool or moved to shedding breeds with little or no wool? And the thing is that there is a safe middle option of producing wool below 30 microns, and it doesn't have to be just Romneys. We've done, as part of the trial, we tested some other breeds. We found that the Flynns are quite low. There's a lot of the Flynns are around the 32 micron or lower. And also we know that some of the Cheviots are also quite low. And in fact, one of the Snowline rams that I brought over is working on a Cheviot flock in the borders. We've also, there's Innovis have one of the other Snowline rams, and another Snowline ram is down in West Wales on a Romney flock there, because we just wanted to make sure that it didn't make a difference climatically where you are operating from. And the good news is that it doesn't seem to be that is the case. So there is a future for wool again, and what I would say is that it isn't perhaps as difficult to achieve as we would seem. What we are looking at, we're hoping to get another funded project, because we do need to test very large numbers of sheep to actually make sure that that you have a good starting point. There's no point in starting with a sheep that's 38 micron and putting a 26 micron ram on it, because you'll probably still be over 30. So you need to actually try and sort out your sheep to start off with probably 34 micron or below. And then that way you can actually then breed them very effectively with a lower micron and a much higher value. And just out of interest, you probably can't see it, but the sweater I'm wearing is actually made of our Romney wool, and it's made by one of the large clothing companies, Peregrine's, down in Bristol. And so while it does retail for around about £100 a time, and I probably got about 20 pence worth of wool in it, I think we do have a lot of interest from the manufacturers to have homegrown sub 30 micron wool, and there will be a big demand. So that's my part of the story.
Fabulous. Thanks, Frank. I've just got one very quick question for you before we move on to Tim. Does each breed have an average micron? How do farmers know can any farmer test the micron number of their fleeces?
Yes, any farmer can. The wool
How much does it cost?
This is part of the problem. It's around about £4 to test a fleece.
Okay.
The Wool Testing Authority Europe, based in Carnarvon, which is owned actually by British Wool, they do all the wool testing in the Northern Hemisphere. They are very well geared up to do it. They're very accurate. They use a machine called an Ofta 2000, which is a world recognized machine. But what we're looking at is actually trying to find an on-farm machine. I've experimented with a couple. I imported one from South Africa. Sadly, it didn't work with our type of wool. There is a company in Australia that is experimenting with one at the moment called Woven Optics. And they've just been sort of taken over by Heineken in Australia. And that will actually, the plan is that it will test the wool while it's on the sheep. So you don't even have to cut it off. That could be a complete game changer if it will work with our types of wool. The problem with our types of wool is that it tends to have a much higher curvature.
Right.
Whereas the finer wools are in a way easier to test, and they're less variable.
Okay. Okay, so there isn't an average number for each breed.
No, and within each flock there is big variation.
Big variation.
I tested all
Okay.
the pedigree Romneys, and within the pedigree Romneys there were some that were down in the low 30s, and
Right.
were in the 40s.
So it is purely down to each sheep selection. That's why you have to do the whole selection process.
It is, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, fabulous. Tim, sorry, we will hand over to you now, if that's okay. You're right to share.
You can hear me better now. Okay, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'll try and put some slides up. Is that working?
Not yet. And if anyone has any questions, do pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen as we go along.
Yeah, share. Ding, ding, ding. Oh, there you go. That'll be the one, won't it? Is that sharing? Yes. And let me go. Do. See if can I get it up to a full size.
Slideshow.
Oh, it's obviously not my forte. There you go. Okay. All right. So I was asked to kind of talk about money and data and genetics and wool, but it seems to have kind of slid more to the wool side of it. So I'll kind of concentrate on that. I love money, I love data, I love genetics. I'm not so keen on wool. It's been, to tell you the truth, a pain for me whenever I've dealt with sheep through my life, and has never seemed to be worth the effort. Mainly because I'm not as old as Frank, and I don't remember those good old days when they make money out of them. So I've made my sheep career out of data, really, data and genetics, and we use data to enable accurate analysis of whatever we've got, and to improve the traits that matter, and to have facts to make decisions with, rather than to sit on the gate and look at a sheep and say, hasn't that got a bonny head? And we use the data to record and improve our genetics of our flock, and then the performance of the flock. And this is really simple to achieve, because all you got to do is put a ram out with a bunch of ewes, and hey presto, you've got lambs a bit later. And the important thing is that all these traits you're trying to improve on are heritable to one degree or another, and of course they're cumulative. So once you've got an animal that grows at X kilos, X number of grams per day, then it's set there, and you're moving forward all the time. You don't lose it. That growth is not lost in the same way as if you go and feed an animal a load of food. It can easily get fat, but if you don't put a load of food in front of it, then it won't get fat. So I'm a real nerd with it. We on our flock. So within the Exlana breeding program, I think at the moment there are 2,800 ewes, something like that, and we measure on lambs a whole load of traits: birth weight, dead or alive, suckling scores, lamb survival, scold. We're weighing them at kind of vaccine weights, 8 weeks post weaning, and then post weaning, and we're back fat and muscle scanning them, ultrasound scanning them. We're doing individual worm counts on them, also measuring IgA, which is another measure we use to look at parasite resistance. We're doing body condition scores, wool scores. We're doing the opposite of what Frank's doing. I'm trying to find animals that get rid of their wool soon, so early in the season, so that they're not susceptible to strike. We're also looking at tail length, because we want shorter tails so we don't have to dock them, and we're doing DAG scores, and recently we've been measuring methane emissions, and we chuck all this into a pot, and we get statisticians to help us, and we come up with estimated breeding values that we use to predict the genetic merit of animals for a whole host of traits. And by using this, we see small increases in performance every year, and it works very well for us. Recently, we've also been doing we've been taking DNA samples from all these animals. So I think this year probably 4,500 lambs got individual DNA samples, which means we can figure out how who their mum and their dad are accurately, and a whole host of other things about them. So there are a number of single gene traits that we look at. Scrapie resistance, Myomax is one you might have heard of, which is a muscling gene, and there's there are dozens more. And we also use this to increase the accuracy of our estimated breeding values by using a genomic assessment. So that's what we do for a whole load of different things. And one of the things we do it for is wool. So I always like to bring this up. This is my cost of production of harvest for wool. And in it, I've got here, this is a flock of 350 ewes, which apparently when I did this last year was the average size of a flock in the UK. And I got there a cost of per ewe for strike prevention, shearing, dagging, and for the lambs as well. So when you put all this together, the cost of harvest and protection for wool on a ewe is about £6.13. So it's about £6 a ewe. That's for your average ewe. And most animals at the moment, as Frank said, are getting about £1 a kilo, and that's a bit more than it has done in the last couple of years. But you know, over the last kind of 5-10 years, it's been about £1 a kilo. So most animals are producing 2 to 3 kilos, so they're only halfway to covering the cost of harvest and protection for wool. So most farmers are losing money on wool. So this doesn't cover a whole load of other things in the kind of wool production. It doesn't cover the time spent shepherding woolly sheep, checking for strike and dislodging animals from brambles, checking for cast sheep, all those kind of things. And you know, it doesn't cost in the environmental risks of using things like synthetic pyrethroids, organophosphates, the insect growth regulators that damage soil and aquatic fauna, and we use to protect wool from fly strike. So you know, there's also the kind of the welfare issues of wool. We've got all our sheep, or the majority of sheep in the world, have excess wool because we've bred it that way because we wanted wool because it was a quality product and we wanted to do something with it. Excess wool increases fly strike, and it makes sheep overheat. If you allow them to be natural shedding sheep, then they regulate their body when their temperature when they want to, not when we manage to get there with the shearers. And these kind of sheep are all around the world shedding sheep. They thrive in the Rockies. You find them in the wild ones in the Rockies and in the Alps as well, and of course all through the tropics. In Texas, 9 out of 10 sheep are hair sheep. So we're not a kind of a small part of the world population. So I mean, to sum up with wool, I think very much like Frank actually, that there's 3 ways forward. First of all, you've got to accept that wool is a luxury product. It's not a commodity. And if you want to make money out of it, you've got to treat it like that. So there are 3 things you can do. One is you can grow better wool to cover and exceed the cost of production, which is what Frank's doing. And then the other thing you can do is you can use specialist marketing to achieve profitability, or you can go back to basics and get rid of wool and all its hassles. And that's what I do. Yeah, so that's my short presentation.
Great. Thanks, Tim. That was really interesting. There was a lot of take homes there. I'm sure for a lot of people, there was definitely some for me in there. So without further ado, I will now hand over to Jen, who I believe has a camera working now, which is fabulous. So Jen and Andy, are you all right to take it away? And that's the perfect intro, I think, because you're going to cover some of the specialist marketing, I think, that Tim was just mentioning.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to share our screen for you, so hopefully you can see this one. There we go.
Well, thank you, everyone. Taking on board what Frank and Tim have mentioned, we kind of, in a way, hindsight, have listened to both of them and have tried to guide our own route through. Holistic regen, grazing from meat, fibre and leather, that has come from kind of a background of being in the sheep industry all our lives. Brought up on a small mixed farm with very keen parents for showing sheep. And we know what good looks like, but to guarantee it every time, that is very hard to achieve. So to learn a lot more about the industry, I spent 15 years out on the road, contract shepherding, shearing, dipping, lambing, working all over the countryside. This helped me raise some capital to buy a farm, which has left me in a situation which we have to make money. Through that, Through working with the Wool Board for over 30 years as a collection centre and also as a Wool Board instructor, I've kind of fine-tuned what I think we can do with land to produce a sheep with good quality wool. We have a picture very similar to Frank's here. We run a flock of Romneys. These have been graded up from a Shetland though. 20 years ago, I had all Shetlands. They suited the bill for the time. We were working with a government policy that paid money per head. A Shetland sheep at 30 kilo, 35 kilo, did very well from that policy. When the policy changed, the light white lamb trade also failed, selling lambs. Initially, we did very well selling to Italy, Portugal, Spain. That market disappeared. So you have to maintain a yield. So we started crossing with the Romney. This we found was an ideal match. They were both very hardy sheep, good converters of forage. The coloured genetics of the Shetland moved well into the Romneys. We are now specialising in paying a shearer a good fee to shear that sheep, but then we sell the wool that comes off that sheep per kilo. So to maximise that return, we have to have good quality wool, good sheep, well shepherded in a holistic way. So we're considering the whole of the marketplace and the whole of our production method.
So I think it was about 2015, I've been working on various different educational projects, and this is where we decided we were going to be price makers rather than price takers for our wool clip. We're interacting with the public on many different levels, both here at the farm and off the farm. And, you know, we recognise that wool is only 1% of the textile consumption, and that's all over the world. It's niche. And what you have here is some rams that are just about to go out with our specialist fibre flock, which we call our luster flock because of the genetics based around 4 of the luster breeds, which is your blue-faced Leicesters, like the rams here. We've had Tees Waters, Wensleydales, Leicester Longwools, but at the base of that as well is also the Romney Shetland, so that we can bring in the colour and we can increase sort of fleece density from the Romney. So we are really selecting for hybrid vigour, and you know, we've got luster flocks that are really, really prolific, and they're grass-fed and they're pretty hardy. They live on top of the mendits all year round, and you know, we are able to harvest fleeces blade shorn, and we can charge £20 a kilo for them as a greasy weight. Because of the fibre length, the strength, the colour, the quality, we're actually able to get up to £140 a kilo for that worsted spun yarn because of the fibre length. So it kind of, we agree with what Frank's saying, but also about what Tim's saying is, you know, you have to be selective. If you like wool, go with it. If you don't have it. Just make a decision, really.
So when we decided we were going to specialise in the wool and the wool harvesting, when we moved to Fernhill Farm, after years of making do with shearing trailers, shearing stands, I thought, right, I've got to have a shearing shed. We put in a 4-stand purpose-built shearing shed. This now means that we can harvest the wool precisely. Each individual shearer can have a wool handler working with them. We've got wool tables, so every fleece can be thrown upon that table and inspected individually. It means that the quality can be counted, individual EIDs can be recorded, we can select the best sheep that's within that flock. And what we try now is that we can guarantee those sheep when they're shorn, and they're all blade shorn. That may confuse people or make them think a bit harder. Are we real fools down on the mendits? Well, some would consider that. But I have a passion for blade shearing. It also means we can be timely in when we shear those sheep. So with blade shearing, we pre-lamb shear all our ewes with blades. That leaves about 10 mil of wool on those sheep. Then they lamb, then they run the whole of the summer with their lambs at foot as undisturbed as possible. The majority of sheep farmers who have wool on their sheep will shear their sheep in full wool with lambs at foot, and that is a very stressful time. What we found, as Tim mentioned, wool on the sheep will make them hot. By taking the wool off at that timely pre-lamb time when there's a natural wool break, it works with the natural growth of that wool. So it assists in our management, it makes lambing easier, and it makes just the welfare management of those sheep easier through the summer months.
We can go back to the blade shearing if anyone's got any questions later, but I just wanted to bring in where all of this has sort of led in the last 5 years. So we became verified as regenerative in 2021, and that was based on our sort of mob grazing of flocks. And what you're looking at here is the data that we collect for each of our fields that are grazed from sheep. Mob grazed, moved on, you know, sometimes with cows as well. So I just wanted to bring this into the conversation. Up on each field, we can then sort of measure the water, the mineral, the sort of community dynamics, which is sort of what species we've got growing in that field, sward, however you want to describe it. But basically it gives us this EHI score every year, and that enables us to sell our wool as verified as regenerative, which I have to say has been a very successful market compared to trying to sell regenerative meat. Various sort of scenarios around that, but I just wanted to bring that in, and sort of this is how it kind of works.
Through getting our land recognised as being fully regenerative, it's enabled us then to sell our verified wool. Because it is ecologically produced well, it enables us to work on the land to market basis, that then our brands we work with and the retailers we work with have a known and guaranteed, a repeatable base type wool fibre based on the data we can take along with it, the volume of wool we produce. And then we try and work with as local companies as possible, and if not just British-based companies, to do all the production processes that is required to take wool from the sheep all the way through to a finished garment or some upholstery or some carpet. We are a fibre provider. We also, you cannot do any of this on your own. We try to a little bit, but we're busy being shepherds and looking after a farm and family. So you have to form good working relationships with lots of other businesses. From here, you can see a lot of the businesses we work with. There's more we're approaching all the time or approaching us. And that keeps life quite exciting.
Yeah, Joe, just as a final point, I just wanted to sort of bring into the equation here is that, you know, we're kind of building our own brand as a fibre provider, linking in with loads of other different British manufacturers. And, you know, we've been involved with many different films. The Forgotten Fibre documentary has won over 8 awards already. The whole film is about to come out this week, we believe. And there's lots of other support from people up and down the country. I mean, this Great British Wool Revival, the Wool Journey, is something that's come out this year. And so from a very social side of it, you know, wool is, it's provided us with a new enterprise. It's kind of our passport around the world. And it really does create a new enterprise for us to sort of build a, you know, our family home at Fernhill Farm. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jen and Andy. That was really, really insightful. Thank you. So I think we've got a good range of listeners on the webinar this evening. So if anyone does have any questions, do pop them in the Q&A. So Jen and Andy, I just had a question for you. So did you start with the sort of traditional British breeds? Is that how have you always had those?
Yeah, we've always had British breeds. I did move for a while with a Texel, had some pedigree Texels. I tried crossing them on the Shetland, they work very well, but they can be quite a needy type of sheep. I found with the Shetland and the Romney, at times of the year you cannot supply them with 100% of their dietary requirements. The Shetland is definitely, and the Romney has shown that they will bounce back from a harder time. And that's what you have to have a sheep able to do. They're a ruminant. They will go through parts of the year when they have more than they actually require and they can lay down some fat. And the other parts of the year, they have to do some work. And it's not about buying your feed in at X amount a ton and put it in troughs and having all your sheep trot up to you nicely. That is a false way of farming ruminants.
Great, thank you. Oh, we have got some questions in the chat. Yori, how heritable is wool shedding? Oh, I think this one is for Tim. How heritable is wool shedding, and how easy would it be to pass the trait to more breeds?
It's very easy. It's two crosses and you're there basically. I could tell you that your first cross Lins, a lot of them, probably 15-20% of them shed completely if you choose the right rams. So animals with good wool shedding scores. And second cross, yeah, they're all shedding. And then when wool gets expensive, you know, when you're making money at wool, you just crossbreed on with some good snowline genetics, and you got a couple of crosses, you got your wool back. It's not a, you know, it's not the end of the world. You just you want to make, it's like any other trait. You move forward with it in whatever direction you want to.
So regardless of the breed, if you had some ewes that naturally shed their wool, and would they then, the lambs would then inherit that, would they, supposedly?
So they get it from that side. But you know, it's easier to do with hill breeds that have a hairier Kemp. So a lot of Cheviots and a lot of hill breeds, a lot of the first cross shed. Thins take a couple of generations. I've got a couple of first cross Romney rams that shed, but most of them don't. You know, so it just takes a bit longer if you've got a bit more wool in there.
Okay, thank you. So how would you, I think this one is for you as well, Tim, sorry. How would you start to introduce this into commercial flocks, North Country mules, for example? So is there a certain terminal sire that's better for wool shedding? I guess that could be for anyone. So that could go both ways, for wool shedding or to add value to wool, I guess. So Tim, if we come to you first, then we'll go to Frank.
Well, you just buy a wool shedding top and you breed it in, and then you keep.
Okay, so people are starting to sell that as a saleable trait now, are they?
Oh yeah, we sell plenty of rams to people that want to breed the wool off their flock. If you've got a good flock of sheep, there's no point in turning them in and buying another flock just because they're wool shedding. It's much, if you've put a lot of work and effort into producing a sheep that thrives in your system, you just adapt it by breeding the wool off or by breeding the wool better.
Yeah. So Frank, coming to you on that, on the flip side, is there terminal sires that would be better for a commercial flock if they were wanting to increase the value of their wool?
Yes, there is. I think the thing about the snowline is, which I've used, is that it was been established over the last 50 years, so it's actually a breed rather than a composite. Okay. So it is fixed, which was the important part about it. So one of the issues is people are using a lot of crossbred tups, and they will either throw one way or another. So you haven't got anything particularly fixed, and you can end up with all sorts of monkey bred things, which you don't want. The thing is with the wool, because it's so heritable, and by the sound of it from Tim, that also taking it off is also so heritable. So it works both ways.
Yeah.
But you know, to me, if you're starting off with a woolly breed, why on earth would you want to take it off if you can actually potentially add a lot of value? And while we will probably lose some of the weight in the fleeces by going finer, the increase in value, and also that with the snow line, they have already gone a very long way down to producing sheep with short tails and also with bare around the crutch, so you don't have to crutch them anymore.
Right.
And they all all of the sheep are have the cold temperature tolerance gene in them. So they because they all come from either the high country in New Zealand or from the very harsh areas of North Canterbury. So if you start off with that, and it because it's a composite, it probably started as a Romney 50 years ago, but it's been changed and adulterated in many different ways. And so now, you know, it's a meat sheep, but it will produce fine wool. And that's my aim.
Okay, great. I think, sorry, Frank, I think this one's for you as well. Is the marketing board going to embrace the need for low micron wool?
Yeah, this is going to be well, it's already a bit of a discussion because historically, the wool has always been graded by breed type. And
Yes.
there was nothing wrong with that because it was all going into carpet wool. So you knew that you had a mule or you had a breed from a certain area of the country, and it would produce a different type of wool, or a blackface would do that as well. So by going down this route, we actually need to probably test the wool on farm. This is why it's very important to try and find a testing method. It won't replace the need for the scientific testing that's done at Wool Testing Authority Europe, but it will help speed up the selection process, and it would also help in the grading depots, because the difference between a 30 micron and a 25 micron is very difficult to see. It's you can do it with the merino breed because the merino is all fine, but because we will be dealing with different types and different types of curvature in the wool, it's much harder to grade it in those precise micron ranges.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. So then it's followed on with, yeah, so are they going to grade it at their depots, or will it have to be graded on farm, which I think you've just covered actually, haven't you?
Well, the initial part I can see will be on farm. That will be the way to add most value.
Yeah.
However, the one of the issues is that you need quite large quantities of wool to make it really valuable. You know, there's two extremes to this. Jen and Andy are doing the sort of single fleece, small lots, which is fine. You can do that. But if once you get into the commercial, where if you want to go to the Laxtons of this world, the Abraham Moons of this world, very high end, the minimum amount they're going to probably want is 2 tons. So you need 2 tons of a 25, 26 micron. But the thing is, you know, you could be talking about very big money here. You know, the blue-faced Leicester, I think, recently made about £17 a kilo at auction.
Yeah. Okay, great. So sorry, Jen and Andy, coming to you now. So there's a question I have for you, I think. What micron count range did Jen and Andy get from their Shetland Romney crosses, and do they breed for fineness?
We have done quite a bit of testing in the past. We were down to sort of about 27 with our Romney Shetland lambs, and interestingly, we had some Romney Shetlands and some Shetland Romneys because we swapped over. And you know, as Frank's been saying, you know, the ram really does carry such a very high sort of inheritance rate, and there was 2 micron differences just by swapping, using the rams around, which was, you know, really fantastic. A lot of our sort of hand or artisan crafters, you talk about micron, they don't really understand what that word is. They buy on touch, they buy on sight, they buy on color, they buy on repetition, on blade shorn, and they trust us to grade it so that they're not buying something that they can't spin or run through their fingers. So a lot of what we've worked on is sort of sorting of fibers at shearing so that they get repeatable batches that they can then use and there's no wastage. Some of our lusters were down to 28. We haven't done individual flock testing for a while now. We're going for colour and crimp and curls and sort of, you know, a slightly different market. We do also sell through HD wool keepers, because we do have, you know, we're running up to 3,000 sheep here, so we are getting into those sort of you know, commercial volumes. We have spun with Laxtons in the past, so you know, we're kind of we can sort of sort and grade as to whether we're selling individually or whether we're selling in bulk, and obviously that, you know, how you market to a brand is entirely different how you market to a sort of individual final consumer. Brands talk in microns, final consumers, they don't talk in microns at the moment. Right.
Okay, thank you. Is the lower micron wool damaged more easily by wet conditions?
No, I think is the answer to that. The problem with wet has been that you do lose, yes, colour is a problem. And actually this year, is in the south of England, we have had double our annual rainfall.
Yes.
And it has affected the colour of a lot of the Romney wools, which does discount them. But I wouldn't say that that's generally the case. The flock in southwest Wales haven't had an issue as such with the finer wools.
Okay, great. And are you able to treat hair sheep for ticks with spot-on treatments?
Yeah, just like any other sheep.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
The Shetland has good forage conversion ratio. How does the Shetland Cross Romney compare?
The Romney Shetland, I would say, was very comparable. We found some really good growth rates within 0.25 grams a day on the Romney Shetland. They've got a definite lust for life. Any of you who have tried keeping Shetlands will know they're keen visitors to the neighbours unless you've got a good fencing system. So they do convert forage very well. And obviously by having that half bred or 3/4 bred with a Romney back on them, you're increasing your yield for animal kept. We're all charged, like if you take a lamb to the slaughterhouse, you'll charge per lamb. If you take it to the butcher, you charge per kilo. So you have to have yield to make it an economic return on that individual animal.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm just reading quite a long. Oh, I think this is just one of our listeners saying that the use of good quality Shetlands in a commercial setting shouldn't be underestimated. They're a Shetland breeder in Scotland, I believe. And I think the popularity is increasing year on year. When put to a terminal side, they lamb easily, often outdoors, are extremely milky mothers, produce much shorter tails as they are naturally flute-tailed breeds, grow quickly, and will improve wool quality considerably to terminal sire wool. Thank you.
We'll do all of that. I would also say that if you wanted to move into a Shetland shedding type breed, they would do that very quickly as well, because when we used to shear the Shetlands in June, July time, you would quite often get to them and only have like a waistcoat of wool on that sheep. The rest of self-shedded. So that breed will give you both options.
Okay, great, thank you. This might be a question for Frank, actually. If people are looking to sort of go into diversifying their breeds and looking to increase their income from wool, Frank, is there any funding available out there, or is there any projects currently going on that people could get involved with?
We are hoping we're going to apply for another grant. We had the Innovate grant, which was for the last year, which is far too short, of course, really. We are going to apply for another one where we're going to be looking at other breeds and breeders to be included in this, because we need to build up a much bigger database of breeds, and the amount of testing that would need to be done is significant. I'd also ask Tim, how much he's having to pay for DNA, because we can see that DNA would be a way of accelerating this. In New Zealand now, most or all of the main breeders are using DNA. Here it seems to be a bit more of a struggle to get started.
Oh, it costs you about 14 quid a sample. So you gotta have some return on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all economics, isn't it? I mean, to kind of sum up, I think that that we all do different things with wool, and they're all perfectly logical, and they all kind of make sense, and they all make money, and I don't see any other way of progressing with wool, apart from being a whinging farmer and saying it's all the fault of somebody else, and why won't people pay me for what I'm producing? And I don't have any time for those kind of people, and I don't, they got to buck up and take control of their lives.
Fabulous, thank you. I guess one for all of you in terms of exporting wool. Are you, Jen and Andy, is it all sort of British? Are you selling within Brit? Is any of yours exported? Is there an increasing demand for our wool abroad, or what's the?
Well,
Or is it all
Brexit put a stop to any international sales. Americans really love British wool, but you can't get it there for a sensible price. So majority of what we do these days is within probably within a 50-mile radius, to be honest, because people come to our farm open day. They learn how to shear a sheep. You know,
so it's a real experience for people.
Journey themselves. They want to say, you know, I know where this has come from, and there's a huge movement for that. And I think that's a really nice future for connecting, you know, what comes out of the countryside with what we eat and what we wear. And sheep are multi-purpose. You know, they are the most efficient land management tool out there. We can wear their wool, we can use their sheepskins, we can use the bones, the offal. You know, we need to think holistically.
Yeah, definitely.
So, you know, I've never really targeted selling overseas because there's millions of people here on our doorstep.
Yeah, no, totally. No, that's great. Thank you. No, and I think you've hit it on the head there. I think there's been a lot of marketing of cattle, and as you say, utilizing the whole carcass of cattle, and sheep have this amazing resource there that, as you say, we just need to get the public to value it more. And I guess, as you say, that's down to us as farmers to do that as well, and to really get out there and shout about what we do and how we do it. So no, I guess unless there's anything else from any of the other, oh, sorry, Jen, there's one more question for you here. The handle of fleece, comparing different breeds with similar micron counts, does the handle of the wool change between breeds or crosses?
Yes, we have, you know, much variation even within the Romney rams that we are buying, you know, to put across our flock. I have to say hardly any Romney breeders are even testing their fleeces. So, you know, we have to go along and decide what that fleece is going to look like, you know, in the ram. Nobody's telling us any information about its wool type. And you know, there's huge variation because there's a lot of variation in the Shetland and in the Romney, and our luster flock is a combination of 6. And that's actually what feeds into our sort of artisan market. And that's a decision that I have to make at shearing as to which direction it's going to go. And I'm not afraid to carve up a fleece. I do think if you chuck it all in one bag, I say it's a bit like mincing your fillet steak. You know, there is people that will pay for very, very special parts of the fleece. And the bits that we don't spin, we can turn into felt acoustic insulation, you know, and even if it's covered in dags, it's fabulous mulch for your garden, for your new hedges that we're all planting, trees. Give it back to the land. You know, we need to be carving up fleeces.
No, exactly that. And I think we're guilty of that at home. I know because it's been worth so little, we just chuck it all in the same bag and just, so no, definitely going back to that, really separating it out. And as you say, just knowing the value of it.
Come back on that, the handle part. When you get a sample tested by WTAE, it will come back as one of the measurements is a comfort factor. And the comfort factor is really how it feels. So the lower the micron, the higher the comfort factor, but that also does include other things like the curvature as well. And it's interesting that because I have most of my rams tested, and it's always interesting when I look at these rams, and what I thought was going to be the finest ones very often aren't at all, and vice versa. I always thought that the very close wooled ones would be the finest fleeces. They're not. It's actually the more open fleeces that are finer.
Yes, definitely. I know we show our own sheep, so I know from experience, as you say, you look at the ones you think are going to have the better fleece, and they actually be the ones that are the worst, if you like. I think this is a question for you. So one more question. If a breed society wanted to be involved in testing and obtaining a grant, how would they go about it?
Well, contact me, because we are going to be submitting another application to Innovate, which we're hoping will be a 3-year project. And this time it'll probably include Innovis being involved as well. Innovis are already going quite a way down on a lot of the rams and the terminal rams and the maternal lines. They are looking at now at including wool and reducing fibre diameter in the wool. It's the whole thing, I think, is going to change quite quickly. When I first looked at this, I did think about just doing it within the Romney breed, but I realised that if I was going to do it, it was going to take me 20 years. And I decided that I hadn't got that long. By actually importing the snow line, I can probably do it in 5 years. And the snow line, I think, can be used within other breeds to be interchangeable without actually drastically altering the breed. Or in fact, the Romney Snowline cross, is I say we've got lambs now which are 22 micron, and we don't quite know how that's happened, but we know now that we can do this relatively quickly with lots of different breeds. But I would stress, you need a white-wooled sheep to start with, and you need to be really targeting sheep that are basically 34 micron to start with.
Okay. Fabulous. Right, we've gone 1 minute over, so I will draw it to a close there unless any of our speakers have anything they desperately want to say, or I just will say thank you to everyone. Thank you for all our attendees for listening this evening, and thank you so much to all our panelists. If anyone has any questions they didn't get answered this evening, or if you do want to get in touch with any of the speakers, please do email us and we will pass on your details to Frank or Tim or Jen or Andy or anyone. But no, thank you so much everyone for listening. I say, and do check out the RASE website for any future webinars or events that we have going on. But thank you everyone and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.